Hey, how's it going everyone? This is Dominick from the Comic Book Report YouTube channel, over here doing another guest review for organicpricedbooks.com. And today we're taking a look at a Marvel Epic Collection. That's right, we're taking a look at the Punisher Circle of Blood Epic Collection. This is volume 2 of the Punisher Epic Collection line, and I have to say, this was a ton of fun. The issues in this volume were written primarily by Stephen Grant, Joe Duffy, Mike Barron, and more, and illustrated primarily by Mike Zeck, Mike Vosberg, Whilce Portacio, and more. The comics in this volume were published by Marvel Comics beginning in 1986. The volume itself collects Punisher, the 1986 series, issues 1 through 5, Punisher, the 1987 series, issues 1 through 10, Daredevil, issue 257, and Marvel graphic novel Punisher Assassin's Guild. This is a standard size paperback with glued binding, glossy print paper stock, and the whole book itself comes in at 504 pages. Taking a look at the cover, we have a reprint of one of the issue covers in this collection. It is that just standard Marvel Epic Collection format. I do like that the Punisher is basically black and white as far as kind of the text coloring options. It's very fitting, obviously. It feels ominous and fun. Right from the jump, you kind of get a vibe for this book based on the cover art they chose, and I think it fits really well. While we look at the rest of the spine and the back cover for this Epic Collection, I do want to just provide a brief context for Marvel Epic Collections. If you're unfamiliar with this line, essentially Marvel is printing out these chronological paperback books that really grab about 20 issues, give or take, of a given character or title, and they're released kind of out of order. So like I said, this is a volume 2 for Punisher. I don't think they even have a volume 1 released, but they have subsequent volumes. They're released at different times in different orders. But the idea is eventually if you get them all in numerical volume, you'll have a chronological just read through of these pivotal characters and titles. For my money, it's a fantastic way to bone up on Marvel history for a fairly affordable price point, all things considered. And there was a quick look at the glued binding. Overall, the binding on this book, I had no complaints. Standard for a Marvel Epic Collection. Not a ton of gutter loss, but maybe a bit. You'll see more as I flip through. And speaking of flipping through, let's dive right in. As far as the interior of the cover, we have just some solicits for the other Epic Collections. We have a title page, and then we have a full table of contents. I really love seeing this in these Marvel Epic Collections. We have a kind of titled issue breakdown along with their corresponding page number. It's super easy to index the issues you want to read in these books. Absolutely love it. And then we jump right into that 1986 Punisher series. Because this is a volume 2, as I mentioned, we don't have the first appearances of Punisher. We don't have the origin story or retelling here in this book. We don't have his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man, things like that. What we do have is a lot of the early standalone titled stuff, an early graphic novel showcasing the Punisher. All these stories came out around mid to late 80s, so it is a fairly dated book if you're not used to reading comics from the 80s. I do think that this book was still very gritty, fresh, and in some ways relevant today. I was surprised at the amount of violence they got away with in just a standard Marvel book during this era, but it was a lot of fun. This is my first really solo Punisher book I've had in my collection in some time. Granted, I haven't read a lot of his modern stuff either. I always enjoy when he pops up in different books. I have a couple crossover books with him in like Daredevil or Spider-Man, things like that. I think even Wolverine. But to have one of his Punisher solo books in a collection like this, it was just something else entirely, and frankly, I had a blast reading it. No pun intended with Frank Castle, who is the Punisher. As far as what you get, like I said, we have the first handful of that solo series from 86, and some of his other solo titles. We have that Assassin's Guild graphic novel, and a kind of crossover tie-in issue with Daredevil. That's actually a really fun issue too. I'll show snippets of that later, but essentially there's an issue of Punisher that recounts a certain sequence of events where he gets in a tussle with Daredevil. Then we have a Daredevil issue that basically shows us similar events, but from Daredevil's perspective. A really really fun touch toward the end of this book. Very, very fun stories here. We have Punisher fighting off against kind of these different organized mercenary groups, cults, mobs, things like that. The Assassin's Guild story, obviously he gets caught up with an Assassin's Guild that's kind of running out of New York. There's a lot of interesting kind of corporate conspiracy stuff in that storyline. But overall, with this book, you can expect a lot of gun violence and violence in general. For those unaware, Punisher is a character that has no problems using lethal force in his war on criminals. His whole origin is basically he was like kind of a Marine, I believe, and he came home only to have his family murdered in front of him, getting caught in kind of a mob fight crossfire. He's the only survivor of his family, and he goes on to basically declare war on criminals. He has like a van that's tricked out as kind of an armory. He has kind of these shadowy contacts that help supply him, stock his van, get him weaponry. They're kind of the computer guys. That's this guy Microchip, who I believe has his first appearance within this epic collection. At any rate, a really great character here, and we get some of that early storytelling. I think that this is definitely definitively Frank Castle, as I've seen him adapted in film, television, and other comic book series down the line. But to read some of his early solo titles, it was just a really great opportunity. I had so much fun reading this book. One thing they do throughout this book that I think is pretty familiar with a lot of Punisher runs is this idea that his monologue is through the aspects of his war journal, almost like Punisher's diaries. He basically kind of narrates his own misadventures hunting the criminal element. He'll be like, war journal, date, whatever, and then kind of go into a briefing about his, air quotes, missions and who he's trying to take down or investigate. I really like that aspect. This whole book feels very mercenary to me. He feels like a really intense vigilante, which I do know about this character, but to read his own kind of internal narration throughout this book, it was just really eye-opening in a good way. While I don't agree with a lot of the Punisher's ideology or methods, I think having this character in the midst of the grander Marvel universe is definitely an asset. I think it's really interesting to think he coexists within the same world as characters like Spider-Man. I think even Daredevil in some ways makes a little more sense, as Daredevil himself can get quite a bit gritty. But this is full grit. This is definitely kind of a street violence era. This is a whole different kind of Marvel comic. If you're used to just straight up spandex tights superheroics, this is maybe not your book. If you're interested in crime, detective fiction that kind of skews into violence, this might be more up your alley. I think that this was definitely a fun read. I like that it got into kind of these darker character moments, but it wasn't overly graphic or explicit. Yes, there's depictions of violence, there's some blood, I believe, but it's not over the top. There isn't a ton of graphic material here, so I think that a lot of people that are on the fence about Punisher, this could be a good gateway book for you. I know I mentioned this is a volume 2 a few times, but I will say this is still a really great entry point for those wanting to check out Punisher. I think we get a good idea of who this character is. He does talk about what happened to his family, and we just get to see him solving all of these little isolated missions. And I think that that really is something that sets this character apart, the kind of mission war journal idea of the character. We don't have him just fighting a handful of costumed supervillains. We have him fighting a mob, organized crime, street criminals, things like that. It's definitely a different approach to Marvel Comics, but I think it's definitely welcomed. Just a quick note on Epic Collections again, I do love that when they present the material, it is in chronological order within the collections itself. I think it's such a fun way to read a bulk handful of different comic runs, or certainly at least handful of issues back to back to back. I think that this all feels very cohesive, even though we have a lot of independent little story arcs that are maybe just a couple issues each. I do like that you get a fuller experience. Like, this book is maybe 500 pages, give or take, but you feel like you get to spend a good amount of time with this character. I do think having it in standard edition paperback, it makes it not as cumbersome as dragging around something like an omnibus, although I would love to have some of this early Punisher stuff in omnibus format. I do think an Epic collection is still a very fun way to collect this character. I know I'm definitely happy to have this on my shelf, and I was really thankful for the opportunity to read it. I know Punisher has had a handful of Epic collections that have come out throughout the years. I believe that this one itself is even a reprint, but I had fun visiting these for the first time. At the back of the Epic Collection, we do have a healthy amount of extras, including a lot of production images and sketches, variant covers, collection cover art, different kind of essays and afterwords from different creators and editors, things like that. I think for an Epic Collection, this was actually a very, very great showing of extras at the back. I always love seeing that as a collected edition comic collector. It just feels like bonus features stuffed at the back of your book. A very, very cool showing here. And that really is going to do it for my overview of the Punisher Epic Collection Circle of Blood. I hope to do a fuller review over on my channel in the coming weeks. If you're interested in picking up your own copy, please check out organicpricedbooks.com. And for more videos from me, you can check out my channel, The Comic Book Report. Thanks for watching.